Hi guys, the night is quiet. A warm breeze moves slowly across the wide valley where the Nile River glides through the darkness, as it has for thousands upon thousands of years. The stars rest above the desert with a gentle stillness, bright enough to light the outlines of distant palm trees and quiet mud brick homes. Somewhere far away, water softly brushes against the reeds growing along the riverbank. The world feels unhurried. Nothing asks to be done right now. In a small village beside the river, the last cooking fires have almost gone out. Their faint orange glow slips through open doorways before fading into the cool night air. Families are already asleep on woven mats, grateful that the heat of the day has finally begun to loosen its grip. Clay jars filled with river water stand against the walls. Baskets of bread wait quietly for tomorrow morning. Sandals have been left neatly beside simple wooden stools. Everything feels familiar. Everything is exactly where it was yesterday. And for the people of ancient Egypt, that was often the greatest comfort of all. Tonight, we wander gently into a civilization that lasted for thousands of years. A place famous for towering pyramids, beautiful temples, graceful statues, and kings whose names still echo across history. Yet beneath all of those remarkable monuments lived millions of ordinary people whose greatest wish was often far simpler than glory or adventure. They hoped tomorrow would look very much like today. To modern eyes, change can seem exciting. New discoveries, new inventions, and new ways of living often promise improvement. But ancient Egyptians saw the world through different eyes. They believed that the universe itself depended upon balance, order, and steady routines. A world that changed too quickly felt uncertain. A world that remained familiar felt safe. So tonight, as the stars slowly cross the Egyptian sky, we will not hurry from king to king or battle to battle. Instead, we will walk dusty village paths before sunrise. We will stand beside farmers as they wait patiently for the Nile to rise. We will sit quietly with scribes whose careful hands copy the same symbols generation after generation. We will listen to the sound of bread being prepared before dawn and watch builders lift heavy stones beneath the warm afternoon sun. In these ordinary moments, we may begin to understand why so many Egyptians preferred the comfort of what was known over the uncertainty of something new. The first hints of morning arrive long before the sun. Dark blue skies slowly soften into pale gray over the eastern horizon. The air still carries a touch of coolness left behind by the night. It will not last long. Before midday, the desert heat will settle over the land once again. But for now, people wake while the world is still quiet. Inside one modest home, a mother quietly rises from her sleeping mat. She moves carefully so she does not disturb the younger children resting nearby. The floor beneath her feet is smooth, packed earth that has been swept clean the evening before. She reaches for a clay lamp, shielding its tiny flame with her hand as it flickers to life. Soon the gentle smell of grain fills the room. She kneads dough that was prepared the previous evening. Her movements are practiced. She hardly needs to think about them anymore. Her hands know exactly how much water to add, exactly how long to press and fold. She has repeated these motions countless mornings before. Outside, another family begins almost the same routine. Not because anyone told them to. Not because they lacked imagination. But because this rhythm has always worked. And when something works through season after season, generation after generation, there seems little reason to disturb it. As the first rays of sunlight spread across the river, fishermen untie simple boats from wooden posts. The Nile reflects soft colors of gold and pale pink. Birds call across the marshes while gentle ripples spread beneath each narrow boat drifting away from shore. The fishermen know these waters well. Their fathers knew them. Their grandfathers knew them. The same bends in the river. The same patches of reeds. The same quiet places where fish often gather in the cool hours of morning. There is comfort in returning to places that remember you. The river itself seems unchanged. Of course, it is always moving. Its water never stops flowing. Yet the Nile always returns. Each year it rises. Each year it falls. Its dependable cycle became one of the strongest reasons Egyptians trusted familiar patterns. Their entire civilization rested upon a river that behaved with remarkable regularity. Crops grew because the floods arrived. Villages survived because fields received fresh fertile soil. Families planned their lives around rhythms older than memory. Predictability fed the kingdom. Uncertainty threatened it. As the morning grows brighter, farmers walk toward fields carrying wooden tools polished smooth through years of use. Their sandals press softly into damp earth left moist from irrigation canals. No one rushes. There is work to do, but there is also patience. Seeds cannot be hurried. Plants grow according to seasons, not wishes. The farmer understands this better than anyone. He watches the sky. He studies the river. He feels the soil between his fingers. Each season teaches the same quiet lesson. Nature follows its own steady order. Perhaps people should do the same. This idea reached far beyond farming. It became part of almost everything Egyptians believed. They called this balance ma'at. It was more than a word. It was a way of understanding the universe. Ma'at meant truth. It meant justice. It meant harmony. It meant every person, every season, every river, every sunrise remaining in its proper place. When Ma'at flourished, crops grew well. Families remained healthy. Markets stayed peaceful. Temples welcomed quiet prayers. The kingdom prospered. When disorder appeared, fear quietly followed. Because disorder rarely arrived all at once. It often began with small things. An unusual flood. A failed harvest. An unexpected illness. A broken promise. Tiny disturbances could grow larger if balance was not restored. So ordinary people valued routines that gently protected the familiar shape of daily life. By mid-morning, village streets become busier. Donkeys carry baskets filled with vegetables. Children run errands between neighbors. Potters shape damp clay upon simple wheels while nearby carpenters smooth rough wood with patient strokes. Each workshop carries its own steady sounds. The scrape of stone. The tap of wood. The turning of clay. The crackling warmth of small ovens. None of these sounds compete with one another. Together they form a peaceful rhythm that fills the village without disturbing its calm. The craftsmen often learn their trades from parents or relatives. A young apprentice spends years watching experienced hands before making many decisions alone. There is little pressure to invent entirely new methods. The old methods have already proven themselves. A well-made pot today looks much like one made decades earlier. That is not considered failure. It is considered success. Consistency brings trust. Customers know what they will receive. Artisans know what is expected. Life continues with quiet confidence. Even clothing changes very slowly. Simple linen garments remain common for centuries. Jewelry styles shift gently, but never so quickly that older designs seem strange. Sandals remain familiar. Hairstyles evolve little by little. People often find beauty in traditions that connect them with ancestors whose names are still spoken with respect. By afternoon, sunlight becomes bright enough to make the stone buildings shimmer in the distance. Workers pause whenever possible beneath patches of shade. The heat settles heavily upon shoulders already tired from long hours of labor. Clay water jars become precious companions. Cool river water offers relief, one careful drink at a time. A builder wipes dust from his face before returning to lift another block of stone. The work is difficult, slow, sometimes repetitive. Yet repetition itself becomes almost comforting. One stone, then another. One careful measurement, then another. Entire temples rise through countless small actions repeated patiently over many years. No single day appears remarkable. But together those days create monuments that endure across centuries. Perhaps that is another quiet lesson Egypt teaches. Great things often grow from peaceful routines rather than sudden change. As evening slowly approaches, long shadows stretch across village paths. The worst heat begins to fade. People return home carrying tools worn smooth by familiar hands. Children help gather firewood. Neighbors exchange gentle greetings. Fresh bread bakes once again. The warm smell drifts through narrow streets where tired workers quietly sit outside their homes, enjoying the cooler air before darkness settles over the land. Conversation is unhurried. Many stories have already been told many times. No one seems bothered by hearing them again. Familiar stories are like familiar roads. They remind everyone where they belong. Above them, the first stars quietly appear. Much like they did the night before. And the night before that. And countless nights stretching back farther than anyone living can remember. For ancient Egyptians, this steady sky, this dependable river, these ordinary routines were not signs that life lacked wonder. They were the wonder. Because in a world where tomorrow resembled yesterday, families could sleep knowing the sun would almost certainly rise once again over the patient waters of the Nile, inviting another peaceful day that felt comfortingly, beautifully familiar. The morning returns so gently that it almost feels as though the night never truly left. A pale ribbon of light slowly appears along the eastern edge of the desert. Before the sun itself can be seen, the sand begins to glow with quiet shades of gold and soft brown. The coolness of the night lingers for only a little while longer, resting over the fields like a thin blanket that will soon disappear beneath the growing warmth of another Egyptian day. Along the banks of the Nile, the river moves with the same calm confidence it has carried for countless generations. Small ripples spread around clusters of reeds where water birds wait patiently for breakfast. Their calls drift across the still air before fading into the wide silence of the valley. Nothing rushes. Nothing feels unexpected. The land seems to awaken one careful breath at a time. In a small mud brick house, an elderly man opens the wooden door and steps outside. He pauses for a moment before beginning his day. His joints are stiff after years of labor beneath the Egyptian sun, and his movements are slower than they once were. Even so, he follows the same morning habits he has known since childhood. He looks toward the river. He studies the sky. He notices the direction of the breeze. These small observations are not unusual. They are simply part of living beside the Nile, where each day begins with quiet attention to the world around him. Soon the smell of baking bread drifts from nearby homes. The sound is familiar too. Grinding stones gently turn as women prepare flour. Clay ovens slowly warm. Children carry baskets that seem almost too large for their small hands, walking carefully across packed earth while trying not to spill their precious morning meal. The village begins another day that looks remarkably like yesterday. To an outsider, such repetition might seem dull. To the people living here, it feels reassuring. Every familiar sound quietly promises that life is continuing as it should. The baker knows exactly how hot the oven should become. The potter knows how wet the clay should feel. The fisherman knows where the morning currents usually carry the fish. None of this knowledge arrived suddenly. It was gathered little by little through years of careful observation. That kind of knowledge was deeply respected in ancient Egypt. Experience mattered. Patience mattered. Time itself was a teacher. A young child might spend many years simply watching before being trusted with greater responsibilities. A father would not hurry his son through the work of farming. A mother would not expect her daughter to master weaving after only a few attempts. Every skill unfolded at its own quiet pace. The Egyptians believed that lasting things should grow slowly. The fields beyond the village already shimmer beneath the first sunlight. Farmers spread out across narrow strips of fertile land, carrying wooden hoes over their shoulders. The rich black soil left behind by the Nile is soft beneath their sandals. Each movement feels measured. A man bends to clear weeds from between young plants. Another repairs a small irrigation channel where water has begun to escape into the wrong field. Nearby, two brothers guide a pair of oxen through freshly turned earth. The animals move steadily, their breathing slow and even beneath the growing warmth. There are no loud commands. Only soft voices. Gentle encouragement. The quiet scrape of wood against soil. This work has been repeated every season for generations beyond counting. Every farmer understands that the harvest depends not on speed but on steady care. The crops cannot be persuaded to grow faster. The river cannot be commanded to rise earlier. The seasons answer only to their own ancient rhythm. As the sun climbs higher, the village scribe arrives beneath the shade of a simple wooden shelter. His work is very different from that of the farmers, yet his day is guided by the same careful order. He unrolls sheets of papyrus with slow, practiced hands. His brushes are arranged neatly beside small containers of black and red ink. Nothing is placed carelessly. Everything has its proper place. Writing itself is an act of preserving order. Each sign must be drawn correctly. Each account must be recorded with care. Each list of grain, livestock, taxes, or workers must remain accurate. The scribe has copied many of the same symbols thousands of times. He does not grow impatient with repetition. Instead, repetition brings confidence. Every familiar mark connects him to teachers who copied the same symbols before him. Their teachers did the same. And those teachers learned from others whose names have long since faded into history. The lines of writing become a quiet bridge stretching across centuries. Even language itself changes slowly here. Sacred words are treated with deep respect. Old prayers continue to be spoken long after they were first written. Temple hymns echo across generations. Names of ancestors remain alive whenever families remember them. To forget the past is to loosen the threads that hold the present together. The ancient Egyptians did not simply admire their ancestors. They lived beside them in memory. As the morning grows warmer, merchants begin arranging their goods beneath woven shade coverings. Baskets of onions sit beside garlic, beans, figs, dates, and fresh vegetables gathered before sunrise. Clay jars filled with beer stand carefully in rows. Bundles of flax lean against mud brick walls. Simple linen cloth catches the gentle breeze. The market is not loud in the way many modern markets might be imagined. People know one another. Many families have traded together for years. Conversations move slowly. There is little need for hurried bargaining. Trust has been built over time. A merchant who cheats his neighbors may gain a little today but lose many peaceful tomorrows. That is not considered wise. Reputation grows slowly. Like a tree beside the river, it takes years to become strong. Children weave through the marketplace carrying messages between households. Their feet stir little clouds of dust along the narrow paths. They stop often to greet relatives, receiving kind smiles from nearly every doorway. In villages like these, everyone notices when something changes. A new family arriving from another settlement draws quiet curiosity. An unfamiliar style of pottery is examined carefully. A different method of tying fishing nets becomes the subject of thoughtful conversation. People do not reject new things simply because they are new. They ask gentle questions. Will this work? Will it last? Will it disturb the balance that has served us well? These are practical concerns born from long experience rather than fear alone. Life beside the Nile depends upon cooperation. If one irrigation canal is neglected, neighboring fields may also suffer. If grain stores are poorly managed, many families could face hunger. Small changes can spread farther than anyone expects. For that reason, careful thinking is valued more highly than quick decisions. The afternoon heat settles over the valley like a heavy blanket. Many workers pause whenever they can. Some rest beneath date palms whose broad leaves offer precious patches of shade. Others sit beside thick mud brick walls that remain cooler than the open ground. Water jars are passed from hand to hand. Nobody drinks quickly. Cool water is treasured. The silence of the hottest hours feels almost sacred. Even the animals seem quieter now. Goats gather beneath trees. Dogs stretch lazily beside doorways. Birdsong becomes less frequent until the air itself seems to rest. Inside one modest home, an elderly grandmother teaches her granddaughter how to mend a linen garment. The cloth has worn thin after years of daily use. Rather than throwing it away, the family repairs it carefully. The child watches each stitch with patient eyes. Her grandmother speaks softly. There is no need to hurry. The lesson is about more than sewing. It is about living. Take your time. Do the work well. Care for what you already have. These quiet teachings pass from one generation to the next almost unnoticed. No great ceremony marks their beginning. No monument records them. Yet they shape the character of an entire civilization. As evening slowly approaches, workers begin returning from the fields. Their shoulders are dusty. Their sandals carry traces of rich black soil. Some carry bundles of reeds. Others balance baskets filled with vegetables harvested before the fading light. Children run out to meet them. Dogs wag their tails. The smell of evening meals once again fills the village. Bread, lentils, onions, fresh herbs. Sometimes fish from the river. Sometimes dates for sweetness after a long day's work. Families gather close together. They speak quietly about the day. Tomorrow's work is already understood. There is little need for long discussions. Everyone knows what the morning will bring. And somehow that certainty allows the evening to feel peaceful. Above them, the sky slowly darkens into deep blue. The first stars appear exactly where countless generations have watched them before. An old storyteller sits outside his home while children gather nearby. His voice is gentle. He speaks of the first sunrise, of the Nile, of the gods who brought order to the world. These stories are old, very old. The children already know many of them. Still, they listen closely. The familiar words settle comfortably into the quiet night. The stories are not repeated because people have forgotten them. They are repeated because remembering keeps the world steady. Just as the river returns each year, the stories return each evening. Just as bread is baked each morning, the old lessons are spoken once again. Nothing feels wasted. Nothing feels unnecessary. The repetition itself becomes a kind of peace. Far beyond the village, the desert stretches into darkness beneath an endless blanket of stars. The warm wind moves softly across the sand, carrying with it the scent of dry earth and distant water. The Nile continues its patient journey through the sleeping land, never rushing, never stopping, quietly connecting every village, every field, every family that has learned to trust its gentle rhythm. And as another calm Egyptian night settles over the valley, the people close their doors, place their sandals neatly beside the entrance, extinguish the last small lamps, and fall asleep knowing that if the balance of the world remains undisturbed, tomorrow will arrive just as faithfully as it always has. Long before the first bird calls across the reeds, the Nile is already awake. Its quiet waters slip through the valley beneath a sky still crowded with stars. The moon hangs low over the western desert, casting a silver path across the river that gently trembles with every small current. Palm trees stand almost perfectly still. Even the wind seems content to rest for a little while longer. The villages remain asleep. From a distance they appear as soft shapes rising from the earth itself, their mud brick walls blending so naturally into the landscape that they almost seem to have grown there instead of being built by human hands. Flat roofs hold the night's coolness. Narrow doorways remain closed. Clay jars sit quietly against the walls where families left them before going to bed. Nothing calls for attention. The silence is complete enough that even the smallest sound becomes noticeable. A reed brushing against another reed. A fish breaking the surface of the river for only a moment. The gentle splash of an oar from a fisherman beginning his work before sunrise. For the people of ancient Egypt, mornings like this had greeted countless generations before them. Grandparents remembered them from childhood. Their own grandparents had known the same peaceful darkness before dawn. It was difficult to imagine a morning that looked very different. And perhaps that was exactly the point. When each day opened in a familiar way, the world itself seemed dependable. Soon a rooster announces the coming daylight. One by one, doors begin to open. A woman steps outside carrying an empty clay jar. She walks toward the community well with steady, unhurried footsteps. The earth beneath her sandals is cool for now, though she knows it will become warm before long. As she walks, she passes neighbors beginning their own routines. An elderly man sweeps dust away from the entrance to his home. A young boy gathers dry reeds that will help start the morning fire. Two sisters laugh quietly while carrying baskets balanced carefully upon their heads. Nobody appears surprised by what the others are doing. There is comfort in seeing familiar faces performing familiar tasks. The village is like a woven cloth. Each person is a thread. Every thread has its place. Remove too many, and the cloth begins to loosen. The first cooking fires send thin streams of smoke into the brightening sky. Soon the smell of fresh bread once again fills the narrow streets. Grain has already been ground into flour before sunrise. Water has been mixed with careful hands. The dough has rested just long enough before entering warm clay ovens. The process has changed very little over the years. Every household develops its own small habits, but the rhythm remains nearly the same throughout the valley. Children learn these movements almost without realizing it. At first they simply watch. Then they help carry flour. Later they knead dough beneath the gentle guidance of patient hands. Eventually the work becomes so familiar that they no longer think about each motion. Their hands remember for them. Memory lives not only inside the mind. It also lives inside ordinary work repeated day after day. As sunlight slowly spreads across the fields, farmers begin another careful inspection of their crops. The fertile land beside the Nile is narrow compared to the endless desert surrounding it. Dark, rich soil gives way rather suddenly to pale sand stretching toward distant hills. Every Egyptian understands this contrast. Life depends upon protecting the fertile strip of land beside the river. Beyond it waits a world that offers far less. Because of this, farmers pay close attention to every canal carrying water across their fields. They kneel beside small channels to remove clumps of mud that might slow the gentle flow. They repair low banks with handfuls of wet earth pressed firmly into place. The work is slow. Sometimes it feels almost invisible. When a canal functions well, few people stop to admire it. Its success lies in how quietly it performs its task. In many ways, this reflects the Egyptian idea of order itself. The best order is not loud. It does not demand attention. It simply allows life to continue peacefully. Nearby, a father works beside his youngest son. The boy cannot yet manage the heavier tools, so he carries smaller baskets filled with weeds pulled from between rows of young plants. From time to time he asks questions. Why must this channel stay clear? Why do we plant now instead of later? Why is the soil darker than the sand beyond the fields? His father answers patiently. Not with complicated speeches. Only with simple observations gathered from many seasons. The water must keep moving. The plants know their season. The Nile gives us the soil. These answers are enough. The boy learns by watching as much as by listening. His education grows from the land itself. Farther along the riverbank, fishermen prepare long nets that have already served them through many years. One man notices a small tear near the edge. He sits quietly upon the shore to repair it. His fingers move with remarkable care. Each knot is tied in almost exactly the same way. A stronger knot might seem like an improvement. A faster knot might save time. But these familiar knots have held countless fish before. Why change something that has already earned trust? This way of thinking appears again and again throughout Egyptian life. It is not that people never discovered better ideas. Rather, every new idea had to prove itself slowly. A single successful season was not enough. One fortunate harvest did not erase generations of experience. Time itself tested every change. Only patience could reveal whether something truly deserved a place beside older traditions. As the morning continues, boats begin traveling farther along the Nile. Some carry vegetables to nearby settlements. Others transport jars of oil, woven baskets, linen cloth, or carefully carved wooden furniture. The river serves as the Great Road of Egypt. Travel upon water is often smoother than travel across dusty land. Even so, journeys remain measured. The current determines much of the pace. The wind fills simple sails when it chooses. No traveler expects perfect speed. Instead, people learn to move with the river rather than against it. A merchant stands quietly at the front of his boat, watching villages pass by one after another. Many appear remarkably similar. Children playing near the shore. Women washing clothing along the riverbank. Men repairing fishing boats. Palm trees leaning gently over the water. White birds lifting into the sky whenever a boat comes too close. Some travelers might wish for greater variety. The merchant feels something different. Every familiar village tells him he is still home. The same rhythms continue wherever the Nile flows. Around midday, temple courtyards begin filling with gentle activity. Priests move quietly through cool stone halls where sunlight enters through carefully placed openings high above. The air smells faintly of incense. Footsteps echo softly against smooth floors worn by generations before. The rituals performed here are deeply familiar. Each gesture has been practiced countless times. Each spoken prayer follows words carefully preserved across centuries. The priests are not trying to invent new ceremonies. Their responsibility is almost the opposite. They must protect the old ones. If the sacred order remains unchanged, then perhaps the balance of the world will also remain secure. Outside the temple walls, life continues with its ordinary tasks. Builders carry limestone blocks beneath the afternoon sun. Sweat gathers across their shoulders. Dust settles into the folds of their linen clothing. They pause often for water, wiping their faces with rough cloth before returning to work. Each stone is measured, adjusted, measured again. No one hurries. A careless mistake today could weaken the structure many years later. The builders know they may never see the finished monument. Some temples require decades of patient labor. Children who watch construction begin may grow old before the final stone is placed. Yet this does not discourage the workers. They understand that some work belongs not only to themselves but also to those who come after them. This quiet acceptance shapes much of Egyptian life. The future is built slowly. The afternoon heat grows heavier. Many laborers seek brief moments beneath woven shelters or the shade of sycamore trees. Simple meals are shared. Bread broken into pieces. Onions peeled by hand. Dates passed from one friend to another. A clay jar of cool water moves carefully around the group. Conversation drifts gently between them. Someone speaks about repairing a roof before the next flood season. Another wonders whether his oldest daughter will soon marry. An older worker remembers a harvest many years ago when the Nile rose especially high. His companions listen with quiet respect. These memories are not treated as old stories with little value. They are practical guides for the present. Experience deserves careful attention. Every remembered season becomes another lesson carried forward. As the sun slowly begins its descent, long shadows stretch across the fields once more. Children return from helping their families. Goats wander back toward their small enclosures. Donkeys carry lighter loads than they did in the morning. The pace of the village softens. Smoke rises once again from cooking fires. The familiar scent of bread joins the fragrance of lentils gently simmering inside clay pots. Someone grinds herbs with a smooth stone. Someone else rinses vegetables in cool river water. Inside one home, an elderly woman sits beside a doorway weaving linen. Her hands move with graceful certainty despite her age. She does not count the threads. She no longer needs to. Years of practice guide every movement. A granddaughter watches from nearby, quietly fascinated. Without realizing it, she is already learning. No formal lesson has begun. No announcement has been made. Knowledge simply passes from one generation to the next like the steady current of the Nile itself. The sky slowly deepens from gold to amber, then from amber to soft violet. The day's heat finally begins to fade. Families gather outside to enjoy the evening breeze. Children lean against their parents. Older neighbors exchange gentle greetings that have been spoken hundreds of times before. There is comfort in familiar words. Comfort in familiar faces. Comfort in knowing that tomorrow will likely unfold with the same peaceful rhythm. Above them, the stars begin their patient journey across the heavens once again. The river reflects their quiet light. Somewhere in the distance, a fisherman rows home with the last catch of the day. A dog settles beside a doorway. A lamp flickers softly inside a mud brick house before its flame is carefully covered for the night. Little by little, silence returns to the village. Not an empty silence. A peaceful one. the kind that settles only where people trust the world around them. And as the Nile continues flowing beneath the endless stars, carrying its calm waters through the heart of Egypt, another familiar day slips gently into memory, making room for one more dawn that will arrive, as always, with the same quiet promise of order, balance, and the comforting gift of another ordinary morning. The stars linger for a little while longer before the coming dawn slowly washes their light from the sky. The night has been kind. A gentle breeze drifted across the Nile for many hours, carrying the scent of cool water through the sleeping villages. Palm leaves whispered softly whenever the wind found them. Somewhere along the riverbank, frogs called back and forth through the darkness. Their quiet voices blended with the steady sound of water moving past reeds that bent without hurry. Inside the homes of ordinary families, the night passed much as it always had. Most houses were simple. Their walls were built from sun-dried mud bricks shaped from the rich earth left behind by the Nile's yearly flood. The bricks held warmth through the cool hours before dawn and helped keep the inside of the house comfortable during the hottest part of the afternoon. The roofs were flat. Many were made from wooden beams covered with reeds and packed mud. On the warmest nights, families sometimes carried woven sleeping mats onto the roof, where the air moved more freely beneath the wide Egyptian sky. There, parents and children rested side by side beneath endless stars. No walls stood between them and the heavens. The moon quietly crossed overhead. The constellation slowly turned. The desert stretched into darkness beyond the fertile valley, calm and silent, as though it too had fallen asleep. For countless generations, people had looked upward before closing their eyes. The same stars had watched over their ancestors. The same moon had reflected upon the river. The heavens themselves seemed wonderfully unchanged. Perhaps that was another reason the Egyptians found comfort in the familiar. Even the sky appeared faithful. As dawn approaches, the first person to stir inside one modest home is a young girl not yet old enough to take on the heavier work of the household. She sits quietly for a moment, listening. She hears her younger brother still breathing softly. She hears the faint rustle of her mother preparing to rise. Outside, a donkey shifts its weight. Everything sounds exactly as it should. She smiles without thinking. There is peace in recognizing the ordinary. Soon her mother lights a small oil lamp, though it is needed only for a short while before daylight arrives. Its gentle flame paints warm shadows across smooth clay walls. Simple baskets hang from wooden pegs. Clay jars line one corner of the room. Bundles of dried onions and garlic rest overhead, safely stored where the air can reach them. Nothing inside the home has been placed without purpose. Space is precious. Every object earns its place through usefulness. The family does not seek constant replacement. A cracked basket is repaired. A worn mat is carefully woven again. A chipped jar may still hold grain if it can no longer carry water. Life encourages care rather than waste. This quiet habit shapes more than possessions. It shapes the way people think. If something can be repaired, why abandon it? If something continues to serve well, why replace it? These simple choices become part of a larger way of seeing the world. Outside, more doors begin to open. Neighbors greet one another with familiar smiles. There is no need for grand conversation. Many have known each other since childhood. Their parents knew one another before them. Their families have shared harvests, weddings, births, and seasons of hardship together. Trust grows slowly. Like a date palm, it takes many years before it offers sweet fruit. The morning's first task for many families is collecting water. Clay jars are lifted carefully onto shoulders or balanced upon woven rings carried atop the head. The walk to the river has become so familiar that even young children know every bend in the path. The earth beneath their feet feels cool. Tiny footprints from birds mark patches of damp soil near the water's edge. Dragonflies skim across the surface of the Nile, their delicate wings catching the growing sunlight. Women kneel beside the river, filling jars with practiced movements. They pause now and then to exchange quiet words. Perhaps they speak about a child who has learned to weave. Perhaps they discuss the coming harvest. Perhaps they simply enjoy one another's company while beginning another ordinary day. No one seems eager to hurry home. The river has its own peaceful rhythm. People naturally slow their pace beside it. A little farther downstream, fishermen untangle their nets. One older fisherman notices a younger man preparing his boat in a slightly different way. The older man watches for a moment. Then he walks over. His voice remains gentle. He does not scold. Instead, he explains why the older method has worked well through many flood seasons. He remembers storms that the younger fisherman has never seen. He remembers changing currents from years before. His advice is built upon memory rather than pride. The younger man listens carefully. He may eventually discover a better way. But first he wishes to understand why the old way exists. This quiet exchange reflects something deeply rooted within Egyptian life. Tradition is not simply habit. It is memory gathered over generations. Every familiar practice carries hidden stories. Sometimes those stories explain dangers that younger people have not yet encountered. Sometimes they preserve wisdom too ordinary to appear in grand monuments or temple walls. A knot tied a certain way. A canal dug to a particular depth. Seeds planted at exactly the right moment. These details may seem small. Yet entire harvests can depend upon them. As sunlight brightens the valley, children begin helping wherever they can. A small boy chases wandering geese back toward their enclosure, laughing softly as the birds protest with noisy voices. His older sister sweeps the courtyard with a bundle of reeds, gathering yesterday's dust into neat piles. Nearby, another child carries fresh bread wrapped in linen to an elderly neighbor who can no longer bake easily alone. Acts like these happen quietly every day. No one expects praise. Helping one another simply belongs to ordinary life. The village functions because everyone contributes according to their strength. The oldest offer memory. The strongest provide labor. Children carry energy and eager hands. Each person supports the others. This balance feels natural. By the middle of the morning, the workshops become busy. The potter presses damp clay between steady fingers. The spinning wheel turns slowly. Its soft hum blends with the gentle tapping of a carpenter shaping wood nearby. A stonemason smooths rough limestone using careful, patient strokes. Tiny clouds of white dust drip through bright shafts of sunlight entering the workshop. The work requires concentration, not speed. The potter knows that rushing the clay only weakens the vessel. The carpenter understands that cutting too quickly may split the wood. The mason accepts that one careless strike can ruin many hours of careful effort. Patience is not merely a pleasant quality. It is part of making things that last. The finished objects may serve families for decades. Some may even outlive the people who created them. Across the village, the scribe settles beneath a shaded portico where the air remains pleasantly cool. He gently unrolls fresh papyrus. His reed pen is trimmed with remarkable precision. A small dish of black ink sits beside another containing red. The colors have different purposes. The order matters. Every line follows another with calm discipline. His handwriting remains remarkably consistent. There is beauty in that consistency. The written signs resemble those copied by scribes long before his own birth. When he writes the names of ancestors, kings, fields, or temples, he becomes part of a chain extending backward through countless generations. His work preserves memory. Without careful records, familiar order slowly begins to fade. This responsibility is carried with quiet pride. Around midday, heat rises from the earth in shimmering waves. The bright sunlight turns pale limestone almost white. Workers narrow their eyes against the glare. Even the breeze grows warm. Many seek shelter beneath woven awnings stretched between wooden posts. Water jars wrapped in damp cloth remain wonderfully cool inside. A farmer drinks slowly before pouring a little water across his hands and face. The relief lasts only a few moments. Still, those moments are deeply appreciated. No one complains loudly about the heat. It has always been part of Egyptian life. People adjust their work instead of wishing the weather were different. The land teaches acceptance. The afternoon passes quietly. Goats rest in patches of shade. Cats wander through the village with graceful confidence, slipping between baskets and clay jars as though they have memorized every narrow path. Children become quieter during the hottest hours. Some nap beside their mothers. Others listen while grandparents tell gentle stories about years long gone. One grandfather remembers when he was young enough to carry heavy stone blocks for a temple many miles away. His hands are bent now. His hair has turned white. Yet his memories remain bright. He describes the long walks before sunrise. The cool feel of limestone before the afternoon heat warmed it. The sound of hundreds of workers lifting together. The shared meals eaten beneath temporary shelters. The younger children listen with wide, thoughtful eyes. Not because the story is dramatic, but because it belongs to their family. Their grandfathers' memories become part of their own understanding of the past. As the sun begins to lower, shadows slowly lengthen across the village streets. The air becomes easier to breathe. Work resumes with renewed energy. Farmers complete the day's final tasks. Merchants cover their goods with linen cloth. Potters carefully inspect vessels drying in the evening air. The rhythm of labor gently slows. No bell announces its ending. People simply feel it. The day itself seems to exhale. The sky softens into shades of amber and rose. Birds cross above the river in graceful lines before disappearing into groves of palms. The Nile reflects every color without haste. Families gather once more outside their homes. Simple evening meals are shared. Fresh bread is broken by hand. Bowls of lentils are passed from one person to another. Children tell small stories about their day. Parents listen patiently. Laughter rises now and then before fading back into comfortable conversation. Nearby, an elderly woman begins humming a tune so old that no one remembers who first sang it. Others quietly join her. The melody is gentle, unhurried. It seems to belong to the evening itself. No one performs for applause. The song simply accompanies another peaceful sunset beside the river. As darkness slowly returns, lamps flicker behind open doorways. The village grows quieter with every passing moment. One by one, voices soften. One by one, flames disappear. Soon only the stars remain, shining above the fertile valley just as they have for ages beyond memory. The Nile continues its patient journey through the darkness, carrying cool water past sleeping homes, silent temples, quiet fields, and endless stretches of desert, where the ancient land waits peacefully for another dawn that will arrive with the same gentle promise of order, balance, and the familiar comfort of a world that changes only as slowly as the river itself. The deepest hours of the night have a quiet beauty that few people remain awake long enough to notice. The village rests beneath a sky so clear that the stars seem almost close enough to touch. Their gentle light falls across flat rooftops, silent courtyards, and narrow pathways that only a few hours earlier were filled with footsteps and quiet conversation. Now they lie still, wrapped in peaceful darkness. The Nile never truly sleeps. Its waters continue their slow journey north, slipping around bends in the river with patient certainty. Soft ripples brush against reeds growing along the banks. A fish briefly disturbs the smooth surface before disappearing once again into the cool depths below. The river asks for nothing. It simply continues. For thousands of years, the people of Egypt learned to trust that quiet constancy. Many believed the greatest blessing was not a world that surprised them every morning, but a world that remained dependable enough for families to build their lives upon it. As the eastern horizon slowly begins to brighten, another day prepares to unfold. There is no sudden burst of activity. No loud beginning. Instead, the village wakes the way a flower slowly opens beneath the rising sun. One door creaks softly. Then another. A small cooking fire is lit. A donkey shakes its head, the gentle sound of its harness carrying through the cool morning air. Somewhere nearby, a baby begins to cry before being comforted by a mother's familiar voice. The sounds arrive one by one until they become the gentle music of another ordinary morning. Inside one modest home, a father carefully folds the woven sleeping mat that his family used during the night. The mat has served them well for many years. Its edges show signs of repair where worn fibers have been woven together again. He runs his hand across its surface for a moment before placing it neatly against the wall. Nothing is treated carelessly. Objects that continue to serve a purpose deserve respect. In a world where every item requires time and labor to create, people learn to value what they already possess. A clay bowl may pass from one generation to another. A wooden stool may support several members of the same family over many decades. Even simple tools carry quiet memories. A father remembers using the same hoe beside his own father in the fields. A mother bakes bread in an oven that her grandmother once tended. The past remains close. Not through grand ceremonies, but through ordinary things touched every day. As daylight spreads across the valley, young children begin following their parents through the morning routines. A little girl carries a bundle of kindling no larger than her arms can comfortably hold. She walks carefully, determined not to drop a single stick. Her mother smiles but says very little. There is no need. The child learns through gentle imitation. Each morning brings another opportunity to practice. No one expects perfection. Steady progress is enough. Nearby, two brothers help sweep the courtyard outside their home. Fine desert dust has settled during the night. It always does. By tomorrow, more dust will arrive. The work will need to be done again. The boys do not complain. Sweeping is simply part of living in Egypt. Some tasks are never truly finished. They return with each new day, just as surely as the sunrise. The people understand this. Rather than resisting these endless routines, they settle comfortably into them. The work itself becomes familiar enough to quiet the mind. Beyond the houses, farmers gather beside the fields. Morning light reveals rows of young plants stretching across the dark fertile soil left by the Nile's floodwaters. Each farmer pauses before beginning. Some quietly study the leaves. Others press the soil gently between their fingers. They notice small differences that might escape an unfamiliar eye. A little more moisture here. A slightly weaker plant there. A narrow channel where water should flow more freely. These observations are made without hurry. Years of experience have taught them that careful attention often accomplishes more than rushed effort. One older farmer kneels beside a young date palm growing near the edge of his field. He remembers planting it many years ago. At the time, it was little more than a fragile shoot rising from the earth. Now its trunk has grown thick enough to cast a welcome patch of shade during the hottest hours of summer. He smiles quietly. Some rewards arrive only after long patience. Ancient Egyptians understood this deeply. Many of the things they valued most required years, sometimes generations, to fully mature. A temple, an orchard, a family tradition, a child's education. None of these could be hurried. As the village becomes busier, the sounds remain gentle. The rhythmic turning of grinding stones. The soft tapping of wooden looms where linen cloth slowly takes shape. The scrape of pottery being smoothed before firing. The distant voices of fishermen calling quietly across the river. Each sound rises and falls without disturbing the peaceful rhythm of the morning. The marketplace slowly comes alive. Merchants uncover baskets filled with onions, beans, figs, and fresh herbs gathered before sunrise. Clay jars stand neatly arranged beneath woven shades. Bundles of papyrus stalks lean against mud brick walls. Nothing is displayed with great show. People already know where to find the goods they need. Many customers have visited the same merchants for years. Trust grows through familiarity. The baker knows which family prefers darker bread baked a little longer. The potter remembers which neighbor needs another water jar before the next flood season. The basket maker recognizes the children who once watched him work and who now return as young adults purchasing goods for households of their own. Time quietly binds everyone together. Near the edge of the market, a traveling merchant arrives with several unusual items collected from distant settlements farther south. A finely woven basket unlike those commonly seen in the village. A carved wooden box decorated with unfamiliar patterns. A small piece of colorful stone polished until it catches the sunlight. People gather around with calm curiosity. They examine each object carefully. Their voices remain soft. No one dismisses the items simply because they are different. Yet neither do they immediately embrace them. Instead, they ask gentle questions. Where was this made? How long has this style been used? Will it last? Can it withstand the heat? Will it serve our families as well as what we already have? These are practical questions. The people are not afraid of every new idea. They simply believe that change should earn trust through time. The traveling merchant understands this. He does not pressure anyone. He patiently explains where each object came from and how it has been used. Some villagers decide to purchase a few unfamiliar goods. Others politely wait. Perhaps next season they will see whether the new baskets remain strong. Perhaps they will ask neighbors about their experience. Careful observation comes before quick judgment. The sun continues climbing higher. Soon the heat settles over the valley once again. The bright light reflects from whitewashed walls and pale stone, making the air shimmer above the dusty roads. Workers move more slowly now. They conserve their strength. Every experienced laborer understands that fighting the afternoon heat is foolish. Instead, they adjust their pace. Builders pause more often for water. Farmers work beneath whatever shade they can find. Weavers move their looms closer to open doorways where the breeze still reaches. The day itself teaches patience. Inside one cool workshop, an elderly carpenter shapes a wooden chair intended for a local official. His apprentice watches closely. The older man measures each piece more than once before cutting. The younger apprentice wonders whether this careful process takes too much time. The carpenter notices the question without hearing it spoken. He smiles. Then he quietly says, "Wood remembers every mistake." The apprentice nods. He understands. A hurried cut cannot easily be undone. It is better to spend a little more time today than many extra days repairing careless work tomorrow. Lessons like these become part of everyday life. They are rarely written down. They travel instead through conversations, shared labor, and quiet example. As afternoon slowly gives way to evening, the village begins to soften once more. Children return carrying small bundles of reeds collected along the riverbank. Women gather herbs from garden plots beside their homes. Men rinse dust from their hands before storing tools safely beneath covered shelters. The smell of fresh bread rises into the cooling air. Lentils simmer gently inside clay pots. Someone roasts fish caught only hours earlier from the Nile. The familiar scents drift through every narrow street, welcoming tired workers home. Families gather together in open courtyards where the evening breeze feels wonderfully cool after the long day's heat. An elderly grandfather sits upon a low stool while his grandchildren gather around him. He does not tell stories of distant adventures. Instead, he speaks about ordinary seasons. The year when the flood came a little early. The summer when the wheat grew taller than expected. The winter morning when a young calf was born just before sunrise. The children listen carefully. To them, these quiet memories matter. They are stories about home. About the land that feeds them. About the people they know. In these gentle conversations, the past remains alive. Not as something distant, but as something woven into everyday life. As darkness slowly settles across the valley once more, lamps flicker inside mud-brick homes. The stars appear one by one above the silent desert. The warm breeze returns from the river, carrying with it the scent of water and reeds. Families roll out their woven sleeping mats. Children grow sleepy beneath the peaceful voices of their parents. Outside, the Nile continues its endless journey through Egypt, flowing with the same calm rhythm that has comforted generations before. And beneath the quiet sky, another familiar day gently comes to rest, leaving behind the reassuring feeling that tomorrow, like yesterday, will arrive with the same patient order, the same trusted routines, and the same peaceful promise carried upon the timeless waters of the Nile. Night settles again over the Nile Valley, not with suddenness, but with a slow fading of light that feels almost like a quiet breath leaving the world. The last orange glow of sunset slips behind the desert hills. The river holds onto that color for a little longer, reflecting it in soft ripples before it disappears into deep blue. One by one, the sounds of the day soften. Voices lower. Doors close gently. Fires are reduced to glowing embers inside clay hearths. Soon, the village becomes still. But not empty. Stillness in ancient Egypt is never truly empty. It is filled with the presence of what was just lived, what will return again, and what has always been. A cool wind moves through the palms near the riverbank. Their leaves sway slowly, making a sound like soft whispers shared between old friends. The desert beyond the fields rests in quiet darkness, stretching far into places no one in the village needs to visit often. That distance itself feels familiar, like something understood rather than feared. Inside the homes, families settle into sleep in the same places they have slept for years. A mother adjusts a child's blanket made from woven linen. A father lies down beside a wall that has supported his family through countless seasons. An elderly woman rests with her hands folded, her breathing steady and slow, as if matching the rhythm of the land itself. Nothing inside these homes is new tonight. and that is what allows rest to come so easily. The Nile continues its steady movement through the darkness, carrying water that has passed through mountains, fields, and villages far upstream. It does not rush. It does not hesitate. It simply continues, as it always has. Somewhere along its edge, a fisherman remains awake a little longer. He sits in his small boat, listening to the water. His net rests beside him, already repaired earlier in the day. He does not need to think about tomorrow in complicated ways. He already knows what tomorrow will likely bring. He will rise before dawn. He will return to familiar places along the river. He will watch the same patterns in the water that his father once watched, and his grandfather before him. The river teaches this kind of patience. Not through words. Through repetition. Through return. Through the steady rhythm of things that rarely change. Farther inland, the fields rest beneath the night sky. Rows of crops that were carefully tended during the day now stand still, their leaves gently cooling after the heat. The soil holds the memory of water, of hands, of footsteps. Even in darkness, the land feels alive in a quiet way, as if it remembers the care it received earlier. A small irrigation channel glistens faintly under the moonlight. It carries just enough water to keep the earth ready for tomorrow. Nothing more. Nothing less. The balance is delicate, but it has been learned over generations. Near the fields, a lone dog lies curled beside a stone wall, its ears twitching at distant sounds that never become threats. It has learned, like the people, that most nights are safe. Most sounds belong to ordinary life. Most changes are small and expected. As the hours pass, the sky slowly shifts again. Stars move in their long, patient paths. The same constellations rise that have always risen. Farmers in distant generations once looked up at these same lights before sleeping. Builders, scribes, mothers, children, and fishermen all shared this same sky. It never interrupts them. It never rushes them. It simply watches, steady and unchanged. In a small home near the center of the village, a scribe's brush rests beside a rolled piece of papyrus. He has finished his work for the day. The records he wrote are simple: grain collected, tools repaired, names recorded, small notes of daily life that ensure nothing is forgotten. He does not think of his work as important in the way grand monuments are important. Instead, he sees it as a way of keeping life smooth. A way of making sure that what is known today is still known tomorrow. Without records, memory would drift like sand in the wind. With them, it remains anchored. This belief in continuity runs quietly through everything. Not as something spoken loudly, but as something lived. In another part of the village, an older man sits outside his home for a final moment before sleep. He watches the faint movement of the river's reflection. His thoughts do not wander far. They stay close to what he knows. The field he worked in. The path he walks each morning. The neighbors he greets without needing introduction. He remembers changes in his lifetime, but they have always been slow. A new tool here. A repaired canal there. A building restored rather than replaced. Even when something new appears, it often carries the shape of what came before. Change, when it happens, arrives like the Nile's flood. Gradual. Familiar in rhythm. Never breaking the land it touches. Inside the village, children sleep more deeply now. Their bodies relax into woven mats. Their breathing becomes soft and steady. They do not yet think about routines or balance or order. But they grow inside them. Day by day, season by season, they absorb the same patterns their parents learned before them. One day, they will repeat them without thinking. Just as others did before. Just as others will after them. The night deepens further. The air grows cooler. Even the wind becomes quieter, as if it too is resting. The desert beyond the valley remains still and endless. It does not change its shape in the dark. It does not shift its meaning. It simply waits, as it always has, surrounding the narrow green path of life along the river. And in that contrast between fertile land and silent desert, ancient Egypt finds its steady balance. One part giving life. One part reminding life to remain careful. As midnight passes, the village is almost completely silent. Only the faintest sounds remain. A distant splash from the river. A soft rustle of palm leaves. The gentle shifting of a sleeping animal. Everything else rests in deep calm. It is in moments like this that the world feels most stable. Not because nothing exists, but because everything remains where it should be. The Nile continues forward without hesitation, carrying the memory of countless days behind it and the promise of countless days ahead. It does not seek to change its nature. It does not need to. And neither, in this quiet world of sand, stone, water, and sun, do the people who live beside it feel a need for anything faster or different. For them, life is not measured by how much it changes, but by how gently it returns. The night in the Nile Valley stretches on with a calm that feels almost endless. Time does not feel sharp here. It does not cut forward in sudden pieces. Instead, it moves like water through a wide channel, steady and unhurried, carrying each moment into the next without resistance. The village remains wrapped in darkness. Not the kind of darkness that feels empty, but one that feels full of resting life. Inside the mud brick homes, families breathe slowly in sleep. Their bodies rest on woven mats that have softened over years of use. The walls around them hold the warmth of the day, slowly releasing it into the cooler air of night. Nothing inside these homes needs to be reimagined tonight. Everything already belongs. Outside, the Nile continues its patient flow. The river reflects faint starlight, broken gently by small ripples that appear and vanish without sound. Along its banks, reeds bend slightly in the night wind, then return to stillness. The same movements repeat again and again, almost like breathing. Upstream and downstream, the same rhythm continues. Villages like this one rest in similar silence, separated by distance but connected by the same water, the same soil, the same slow passing of seasons. In ancient Egypt, distance does not always feel like separation. It often feels like repetition. A fisherman in one village uses the same kind of net as a fisherman many miles away. A farmer in another settlement watches the same stars rise before dawn. A scribe in a different town writes the same symbols on papyrus that another scribe has written elsewhere. Life mirrors itself across the land. This repetition creates a quiet sense of understanding. Not everything needs to be new in order to be meaningful. Before dawn arrives again, a faint change begins in the air. The coolness of night softens slightly, as if the world is preparing itself to return to light. Even in sleep, the village seems to sense this shift. A few people turn gently in their rest. A rooster stirs in the distance. A dog lifts its head briefly before settling again. No one speaks. Yet the transition is already beginning. Long before the sun appears, labor has already been imagined for the next day. Not as burden, but as continuation. Inside one home, a woman quietly prepares dough that was left to rest overnight. She does not question this routine. It is simply what has always been done. The dough has become smoother with time, just as she has become more skilled with each passing year. Her hands move without hesitation. The work is familiar enough that thought becomes unnecessary. This is how many tasks are learned in Egypt. Not through instruction alone, but through repetition until memory settles into the body itself. Outside, the first pale line of dawn appears. It stretches slowly across the horizon, soft and quiet, as if it does not wish to disturb the night too suddenly. The sky changes gradually from deep blue to a lighter shade, then to a faint gold that spreads across the edges of the desert. The Nile reflects this change before the land does. Water always receives light first. Then the fields. Then the homes. Then the people. One by one, the village returns to waking life. A man opens his door and pauses to feel the morning air. A child sits up, blinking slowly, still caught between sleep and waking. A woman steps outside carrying a clay jar, already knowing the path she will walk. The day does not need to be planned in detail. It is already understood. Far from the village, farmers begin to move toward their fields again. The soil beneath them has cooled during the night, holding the memory of yesterday's heat. Soon it will warm once more. They check the irrigation channels first. Always first. Water is the foundation of everything here. A small blockage removed in the morning can prevent loss later in the day. A careful adjustment made now can protect an entire harvest in months to come. These small actions are never rushed. They are performed with the same patience that has guided generations before. Nearby, a group of workers begins repairing a low section of canal wall that weakened during the previous season. They do not treat this as an emergency. It is simply part of the land's ongoing maintenance. The river gives, the land receives, and sometimes, the balance must be gently restored. This understanding removes urgency from many situations that might feel stressful elsewhere. In Egypt, problems are often seen as part of a cycle rather than sudden disruptions. They return. They are managed. They settle again. Near the riverbank, children help gather reeds once more. They do this almost every day, especially during the dry seasons when extra material is needed for building, weaving, or repairing small household items. Their laughter is quiet, not loud or chaotic. It blends easily with the sounds of water and wind. A teacher in a nearby shaded courtyard guides a small group of children in writing. Their fingers hold simple reed pens, learning to shape symbols that have existed long before them. Some of the children struggle at first. Others repeat lines patiently until the shapes feel more natural. The teacher does not rush them. There is no urgency in mastery. Only time. Only practice. Only return. As the sun rises higher, the village enters its steady rhythm once again. Farmers in the fields. Scribes in shaded corners. Potters turning clay. Weavers working slowly at their looms. Fishermen watching the river with quiet attention. Each person moves within a pattern they already know. Not because they are trapped in it, but because it supports them. The middle of the day arrives with familiar heat. The desert sun presses down gently but firmly upon the land. Shadows shrink. Colors brighten. The air becomes stiller. Work continues, but at a softer pace. A man pauses beneath a tree, wiping sweat from his brow before returning to his tools. A woman pours water over a cloth and drapes it near a doorway to cool the air inside her home. A group of laborers share a simple meal of bread and onions, eating slowly, without hurry. The body learns to adjust. To rest when needed. To move when possible. To pause without guilt. This balance between effort and rest shapes the entire day. As afternoon slowly shifts toward evening again, the village begins to feel lighter. The hardest work is done. The remaining tasks are smaller, more familiar. Repairs, cleaning, gathering, and preparation for the next day all unfold in quiet order. Children return from helping in fields or workshops. Their hands are dusty, their clothes slightly worn, but their expressions calm. They do not think of the day as finished or unfinished, only as lived. The sun lowers toward the horizon once more, casting long golden lines across the Nile. The river reflects this light in a way that seems almost timeless. It does not hold on to any single moment. It simply carries them all forward. One day blends into the next. One season into another. One generation into the next. And beneath this slow passing of time, the people of Egypt continue their lives in patterns that feel steady enough to trust. Not because change never exists, but because change itself moves gently here. Like the river, like the wind across the desert, like the quiet return of dawn after every night. As the first stars begin to appear again, the village prepares for rest once more. Lamps are lit briefly inside homes. Meals are shared. Voices soften. And gradually, the world returns to silence. Not as an ending, but as a pause before everything familiar begins again. The night returns again, as it always does, without surprise. It arrives not like an interruption, but like something expected, something the land has already agreed upon. The sky deepens slowly above the Nile Valley, first holding onto the last faint colors of sunset, then letting them fade into a soft blue, and finally into the quiet darkness that feels familiar rather than unknown. The village settles into stillness. Not sudden stillness. A gradual one. Like breath slowing. Like movement easing into rest. Inside the homes, the glow of small lamps appears behind doorways for a short time. Their light is warm and gentle, flickering across clay walls and woven mats. Shadows stretch and soften, then disappear as the lamps are covered and dimmed for the night. One by one, the sounds of the day retreat. Footsteps fade. Voices lower. Even the smallest tasks come to a close. A wooden bowl is placed carefully beside a sleeping mat. A water jar is checked one final time. A door is eased shut with quiet care, as if even the wood itself should not be disturbed too harshly. Everything has its place. Everything returns to it. Outside, the Nile continues its slow movement through darkness. The river does not change its rhythm with the setting sun. It does not become louder or quieter in response to human activity. It simply continues, carrying water that has passed through countless seasons, through distant lands, through fields and villages both known and unknown. It is the same river that earlier brought life to the fields. The same river that carried boats under the morning sun. The same river that reflected the afternoon heat in shimmering light. Now it reflects stars instead. A fisherman remains near the bank longer than most. He sits quietly in his small boat, hands resting on the edge of the wood. He is not in a hurry to return home. The river at night feels different, but not unfamiliar. He has known it in this state many times before. The water moves slowly past him. He listens more than he watches. The soft sound of current. The distant rustle of reeds. The occasional movement of something alive beneath the surface. These are not strange sounds. They are the sounds of a world that continues whether people observe it or not. He thinks, as many in his position do, that the river has its own memory. Not memory like a person, but memory in its patterns. It remembers where it flows. It remembers how it rises. It remembers how it returns. And because of that, those who live beside it learn to remember too. Farther inland, the fields lie in complete rest. Rows of crops stand still under the night sky, their shapes softened by darkness. The soil has cooled after the long heat of the day, holding moisture carefully within its surface. Irrigation channels lie quiet but ready, like pathways waiting for the next flow of water. Nothing in the fields is urgent tonight. Everything is paused. Even the wind seems to pass more gently here, as if aware that growth requires quiet rather than disturbance. A single worker walks slowly along the edge of a canal, checking that water levels remain steady. He carries no lantern. The path is familiar enough that light is unnecessary. His footsteps are slow and measured. He pauses once. Looks down into the channel. Sees the faint reflection of stars trembling on the water's surface. Everything is as it should be. He continues on. In the village, families sleep deeply now. Children curled beside parents. Elderly figures resting in the same positions they have returned to for years. The rhythm of sleep is as important as the rhythm of work. It restores what the day uses. It prepares what tomorrow will require. Even dreams, in this quiet world, are shaped by repetition. Dreams of water, of fields, of bread baking in the morning, of familiar voices calling across courtyards. The night is not a break from life. It is part of it. Above everything, the sky continues its slow movement. Stars shift in patterns that feel unchanging to the people below. The constellations rise in their familiar order. The same shapes appear that have always appeared. They are watched not with anxiety, but with recognition. The sky is one of the most reliable things in existence. It does not forget its path. It does not abandon its rhythm. It simply continues. And so, people trust it. In a small home near the center of the village, a grandmother lies awake for a moment longer than the others. She listens to the quiet breathing of her family. She listens to the faint sounds outside, an animal moving, the wind brushing against a wall, the Nile far away but always present. Her thoughts are not restless. They are calm. She thinks of seasons she has lived through. Floods that came gently. Harvests that arrived on time. Years that passed without dramatic change, each one blending softly into the next. She remembers how things were when she was younger. And she notices how things are now. There are differences, but they are not sharp ones. A new tool here. A slightly different style of weaving there. A repaired building where an old one once stood. But the shape of life remains the same. Morning still comes after night. Fields still depend on the river. Families still gather at the end of the day. Change, when it appears, does not feel like rupture. It feels like continuation. As if the world is adjusting itself slowly rather than becoming something entirely new. This is what makes it acceptable. Not its speed, but its familiarity. Eventually, even the grandmother's thoughts soften into sleep. The village becomes fully quiet. Only the Nile remains in motion. Its current flows past banks of reeds and sand, past sleeping animals and silent fields, past homes where people rest without worry of sudden interruption. The river carries everything forward without rushing anything behind. Time itself feels shaped by it. Not broken into sharp pieces, but stretched into long, continuous flow. Hours pass. Then more. The night reaches its deepest point. A stillness settles across the valley that feels almost complete. Even distant sounds fade into the background of darkness. There is no sense of urgency anywhere. Only continuity. Only return. And slowly, without announcement, the sky begins to shift again. A faint light touches the edge of the horizon. Not bright at first. Only present. A suggestion that darkness is loosening its hold. The Nile catches this change before the land does. It always does. Water reflects light earlier than soil or stone. A thin line of silver appears across its surface, trembling gently as the current moves beneath it. The village remains asleep for a little longer. But the world has already begun its quiet turning. Another day is forming. Not new in the way that feels unfamiliar, but new in the way that feels expected. The same patterns returning. The same routines unfolding again. The same life continuing, gently and steadily, along the ancient river that never stops carrying time forward. The first light of dawn does not arrive all at once. It begins as a softness at the edge of the world, where darkness and sky meet above the desert. A faint pale glow spreads quietly, almost uncertain at first, as if the night is still deciding whether to leave. The Nile Valley responds before the village does. Water always notices change first. The river shifts from deep shadow into a thin silver reflection. The surface trembles gently as the current continues its steady movement. Small ripples catch the early light and release it again, broken and soft. Along the banks, reeds begin to separate themselves from darkness. Palm trees slowly regain their shape. The outlines of fields return, still resting but no longer hidden. Inside the village, sleep continues for a little longer. The houses remain still. The clay walls hold the warmth of the night. A few birds begin to move, quietly testing the morning air before fully announcing themselves. Then, gradually, the village begins to wake. Not with urgency. With familiarity. A door opens slowly. A hand reaches for a clay jar. A blanket is folded in the same motion it has been folded for years. The beginning of the day feels less like a start and more like a continuation. Inside one home, a young boy sits up and watches the light grow through a small opening in the wall. He does not rush to stand. He simply observes the change, as children often do, without fully understanding how many times they will see the same transition in their life. Beside him, his mother prepares bread dough already shaped from the previous evening. Her movements are steady. Almost automatic. The rhythm of the morning has been practiced so many times that it no longer needs thought. Outside, the village begins to sound alive again. A donkey shifts its weight and shakes its harness. A woman calls softly to a neighbor. Water is poured from one vessel into another. Fire is carefully brought back from glowing embers. Each sound is small. None are sudden. Together, they form the gentle return of daily life. The Nile continues its patient flow just beyond the houses. It carries no memory of interruption between night and morning. To the river, everything is continuous. Farmers soon begin walking toward the fields. Their footsteps follow paths already shaped by countless journeys before them. The earth beneath them is familiar. Even the air feels the same, though it changes slightly with each passing hour. The fields await them in quiet order. Rows of soil prepared for planting or tending. Canals resting with just enough water to sustain what is growing. Nothing appears new. Yet everything requires attention. A farmer kneels beside a channel and presses damp soil into a small gap. The repair is simple, almost unremarkable. But it preserves the balance of water across the land. Another checks the leaves of young plants, noticing small changes that might matter later in the season. These actions are not dramatic. They are careful, repeated, trusted. In a nearby workshop, a potter begins turning clay again. The wheel moves slowly at first, then steadies into rhythm. His hands guide the shape without forcing it. The clay responds gently, as if remembering the form it is meant to take. Nearby, a weaver adjusts threads on a loom. The pattern is not new. It has been made before, many times. But each repetition still requires attention. A small mistake could shift the balance of the design. And so, she works with calm focus, knowing that precision comes not from speed, but from familiarity. The market slowly awakens once more. Baskets are placed in rows. Goods are uncovered from woven coverings. The same conversations begin again, just as they did yesterday. Not identical, but similar enough to feel comforting. A merchant greets a returning customer without needing to ask many questions. He already knows what is needed. The exchange is simple, built on trust shaped over time rather than words alone. Near the edge of the river, fishermen prepare their boats. They untangle nets that were folded carefully the night before. They check wooden planks for strength, though they already know the condition of their vessels. Their movements are calm, almost ritual-like. Each action prepares them not for something unknown, but for something already understood. The river will behave as it has always behaved. Fish will move in familiar patterns. The current will guide them as it always does. There is comfort in that predictability. As the sun rises higher, the valley fills with light again. Heat begins to grow across the sand, slowly pressing down upon the land. Shadows shorten. Colors brighten. The familiar warmth of the day returns. Work continues in every direction. Not in haste, but in steady rhythm. A child carries water carefully so it does not spill. An elder sits beneath shade, guiding younger hands in small tasks. A builder checks stone placement before lifting another block. A scribe writes slowly, ensuring each symbol remains clear and unchanged. Everything is connected by repetition. Not repetition as boredom, but repetition as stability. As the day progresses, the idea of change remains distant. Not absent. Just slow. If change comes, it does not arrive loudly. It enters through small adjustments. A slightly better tool. A repaired canal. A new trade item seen once or twice before becoming familiar over time. It is accepted only after it proves itself through seasons. This is how trust is formed. Not quickly, but through patience. By midday, the village moves with the weight of the sun. People pause more often in shaded places. Water becomes more precious in thought and action. Conversation becomes quieter, shorter, more efficient. Even rest feels structured, as if the day itself demands balance between effort and stillness. And yet nothing feels broken. Nothing feels unstable. The world remains reliable even in its heat. As afternoon begins its slow descent toward evening, the village once again prepares to close the cycle of the day. Tools are gathered. Workspaces are cleaned. Animals are guided back toward shelter. Meals begin to form from stored grain, vegetables, and fish brought earlier from the river. The smell of bread rises again into cooling air. Familiar. Comforting. Expected. Children return from their small tasks, their movements slower now, their energy softened by the long day. They sit near their families, listening to voices that speak quietly about ordinary matters. Nothing urgent. Nothing new. only life, continuing in its steady form. The sun lowers toward the horizon once more. The Nile reflects it as it always does, turning gold into copper, then into fading light. And as the sky begins again to soften into evening, the village prepares for another night that will bring rest, silence, and the promise of another morning shaped by the same calm patterns that have guided this land for as long as memory can reach. Evening arrives the way it always does in the Nile Valley, without hurry, and without resistance. The light does not disappear at once. It fades slowly, as if the world is gently closing its eyes. The fields lose their sharp edges first, then the river softens into a dark ribbon of movement, and finally the village becomes a cluster of quiet shapes resting beneath the sky. The heat of the day begins to leave the ground. Stone walls cool. Clay floors hold onto the last warmth for a while longer before giving it back to the night air. People move a little more slowly now, not because they are tired in a dramatic way, but because the day itself has guided them into a calmer rhythm. Work is no longer urgent. It is finishing. In one household, a woman carefully covers a pot of lentils so it will stay warm for the evening meal. The motion is simple, repeated countless times across generations. Nearby, a child watches the small flame of an oil lamp being lit again, its glow soft and steady against the growing dark. Inside these homes, evening feels like a return. Not to something new, but to something known. Outside, the village gathers itself into quieter shapes. People sit in small groups near doorways, speaking in low voices. The conversations are not long. They do not need to be. Much of the day has already been shared through routine and observation. A farmer mentions the condition of the canals. A potter speaks briefly about clay that behaved well today. A fisherman notes the movement of the river at dawn. These are not stories meant to impress. They are simply ways of keeping life connected from one day to the next. Beyond the village, the Nile continues its steady flow through the darkening land. It carries reflections of the first stars as they appear one by one. The water seems almost endless in this light, as if it is both moving and still at the same time. Along its edge, reeds bend slightly in the evening breeze. A small animal moves through the grass, barely disturbing it. Then silence returns again. The river accepts all of it without change. Farther inland, fields that were full of activity only hours before now rest completely. The soil holds the memory of hands that worked it throughout the day. Irrigation channels glisten faintly under starlight. Nothing is active. Yet nothing is abandoned. Everything waits. There is a sense that tomorrow will simply continue what today began. A group of workers walk slowly back from the fields, their steps unhurried. They do not speak much. Their bodies carry the quiet weight of the day's labor, but not in a painful way. It is the kind of tiredness that belongs to something completed rather than something unfinished. They pass familiar paths. They pass familiar trees. They pass the same stone markers they have passed many times before. Nothing about the route changes. And so, their minds do not need to pay close attention. This is how life remains gentle. By removing unnecessary surprises. Inside a small home, an elderly man sits near the entrance, watching the night settle in fully. He is not waiting for anything. He is simply present in the transition between day and darkness. He remembers many evenings like this. Some from childhood. Some from adulthood. Some from years that now feel distant but still familiar in feeling. The same river. The same fields. The same quiet return of night after work. He thinks not in words, but in impressions. The steady passage of time. The repeated cycle of seasons. The way life seems to renew itself without ever needing to become something entirely different. Change has existed in his lifetime, but it has always moved slowly. A new tool introduced after careful use elsewhere. A repaired building replacing an older one in the same shape. A method of farming refined gently rather than replaced entirely. Nothing abrupt. Nothing that breaks continuity. Even memory itself feels stable here. Stories told by elders are repeated to children. And those children will one day repeat them again. Not because they are forced, but because they belong. As night deepens, lamps appear again in doorways and windows. Their light is warm and small against the vastness of the dark sky. The stars above the Nile feel especially present tonight, as they do every night. They do not move in ways people notice quickly. They follow paths so slow that generations pass before any difference becomes meaningful. This slowness makes them reliable. And reliability becomes comfort. A child lies down to sleep after listening to a quiet story told by a parent. The story is not new. It does not need to be. It speaks of the river, the fields, and the balance of life that has always existed. The child drifts into sleep without effort. The world feels safe because it is familiar. Outside, the last sounds fade. A door closes softly. A dog settles against a warm wall. The wind moves gently across the river and then becomes still. The village becomes fully quiet once more. Not empty. Just resting. The Nile continues its movement through the darkness, unchanged in rhythm, unchanged in purpose. It carries forward the same water, the same life, the same pattern that has shaped the land for thousands of years. And as the night settles into its deepest calm, the idea of change feels distant, not because it is impossible, but because it moves so slowly that it becomes part of the same endless continuity as everything else. A world where life does not need to be different in order to remain meaningful. Only steady. Only returning. Only flowing forward, like the river itself, into another familiar dawn that waits quietly beyond the edge of night. The night does not break when the first hint of dawn begins to appear. Instead, it loosens slowly. Like something that has held the world gently for hours, now easing its grip without effort. Above the Nile Valley, darkness still lingers in deep pockets of sky, but the edge of the horizon begins to soften. A faint glow spreads outward, so gradual that it feels more like remembering than becoming. The river notices first. It always does. Its surface shifts from deep shadow into a dim silver line, carrying the earliest light in broken reflections. Small movements ripple across it, not caused by wind or fish alone, but by the quiet turning of the world itself. Along the banks, reeds begin to regain shape. Palm trees rise out of silhouette. The land slowly returns to itself. Inside the village, sleep still holds most people. But even sleep begins to change its shape as morning approaches. A child turns over beneath a woven blanket. An elderly woman opens her eyes for a moment, then closes them again without concern. A rooster stirs in the distance, as if remembering its role in the rhythm of the day. Everything is still calm. But everything is also preparing. In one small home, a man sits up quietly before the others wake. He does not rush. He does not think of urgency. He simply allows himself to become part of the morning as it arrives. He listens. The soft breathing of his family. The distant movement of the river. The faint sound of wind passing through narrow gaps between walls. These are familiar sounds. They do not require attention. They simply confirm that the world is still in its proper place. He stands slowly and steps outside. The air is cooler than he expected, carrying the last memory of night. He pauses for a moment in the doorway, letting his eyes adjust to the returning light. The village around him is still quiet, but no longer asleep. This in-between moment is gentle. Not night. Not day. Just transition. He walks toward a clay water jar placed near the entrance. It is already there, placed in the same spot as always. He touches it briefly, checking its weight, its stability, its presence. Nothing is missing. Nothing is new. And that is enough. Farther away, the first fires of morning begin again. Not large flames, but small, careful ones. Built from habits repeated every day. A woman kneels beside a hearth and feeds it dry reeds gathered the day before. The flame responds quickly, as if it too recognizes her routine. Soon, the smell of bread begins to rise again. Familiar. Steady. A quiet signal that another day is beginning exactly as expected. Across the village, doors open in unison that is not planned, but learned. People begin to move along paths shaped by countless footsteps before them. Each movement feels guided by memory more than thought. Water is carried. Animals are tended. Courtyards are swept. The same actions return. Not as repetition for its own sake, but as the structure that holds daily life together. In the fields beyond the village, the first light spreads across rows of crops still resting from the night. The soil looks darker in morning light, almost richer, as if it has absorbed the quiet hours fully. Farmers arrive in small groups, greeting one another with simple nods. There is no need for discussion about what must be done. The work is understood. Canals are checked. Tools are gathered. Animals are guided into position. The rhythm begins again without instruction. A young boy walks beside his father, carrying a small bundle of reeds. He does not ask many questions today. He simply follows. His steps match those he has seen so many times that they already feel natural. He looks at the land. He looks at the water. He looks at the sky slowly brightening above them. And everything feels stable. As the sun rises higher, the village fully wakes into its familiar structure. The potter's wheel turns. The weaver's loom clicks softly. The scribe prepares his reed pen beneath a shaded space. The fisherman unties his boat once more. Each person returns to what they know. Not because they are unable to do otherwise, but because this is the shape of life that has proven itself through time. Mid-morning light grows stronger. Heat begins its slow return. Shadows shorten. And the world settles into the predictable warmth of another Egyptian day. Even change, when it appears, does so quietly. A repaired tool passed from one hand to another. A slightly improved technique shared without ceremony. A new object from distant lands observed carefully before being accepted slowly, if at all. Nothing rushes. Everything waits for time to confirm its place. The river continues beside all of this, unchanged in its movement. It does not hurry to match human life. Human life instead learns to match it. As the day stretches forward, there is no sense that anything must become different. Only that everything continues. And in that continuation, there is a deep and steady comfort. Because in a world where the river always returns, where the fields always respond, where the sun always rises and sets in its familiar path, the idea of change does not need to be feared. It simply becomes another part of the same long, slow flow of life. A flow that carries everything forward. Quietly. Patiently. And without ever needing to become something else in order to remain complete. The final light of evening rests gently over the Nile Valley, softer now than before, as if the world itself has grown tired in the most peaceful way. The river continues its movement, but even it feels quieter at this hour. Its surface carries the last reflections of the day, faint gold fading into deep blue, then into the calm mirror of night. The reeds along the banks no longer sway with urgency. They move only when the wind chooses, and then return to stillness without resistance. In the village, everything slows. Not because anything has ended, but because everything has been completed in its familiar way. Fires are reduced to soft embers. Doors are closed with gentle care. Homes settle into the kind of silence that feels safe rather than empty. This is the rhythm that has returned again and again, through seasons too many to count, through generations who once lived, worked, rested, and then became memory held quietly in the same land. The Nile remains. It does not rush toward an ending. It does not pause for reflection. It simply continues, carrying forward the same steady movement that shaped every ordinary day, every routine, every moment of quiet repetition that gave life its structure. Along its banks, fields rest under the night sky one final time. The soil is dark and still. The canals are calm. The work of the day is no longer present in motion, only in memory held within the earth itself. A soft wind moves across the water. It touches the reeds. It passes over the rooftops. It drifts through the narrow paths between homes. And then it fades. In one small home, a final lamp is dimmed. The last glow disappears behind clay walls. A family settles into sleep, their breathing slow and even, their bodies resting in the same positions they have known countless times before. There is no need for expectation. No need for anticipation. Only rest. Above them, the sky remains vast and unchanged. The same stars appear that have always appeared. They do not announce themselves. They simply exist, patient and distant, marking time in a way that feels endless rather than measured. The desert beyond the valley lies still. It does not move. It does not change. It surrounds the narrow green path of life beside the river like a silent reminder of how precious continuity can be. And within that contrast between still desert and flowing river, between quiet night and returning dawn, the ancient world finds its balance one final time. Not in change, but in return. Not in departure, but in rhythm. As the night deepens fully, even thought seems to soften. The idea of time becomes less sharp, more like water flowing without edges, carrying everything gently forward without interruption. There is no final moment that stands apart from the rest. Only continuation. Only flow. Only the quiet promise that what has been will return again in its own familiar way. And so, the history does not truly end here. It rests. Like the Nile at night. Like the village beneath the stars. Like the land that has always known how to live without rushing what comes next. Everything fades gently into stillness. And in that stillness, the world remains exactly as it has always been. Quiet. Steady. And softly continuing.